So this is the case of Lucy Letby, and this is the video that was shown on ITV News. This video is very important because it was used as part of the prosecution in the retard trial. The video was shown to the court. If his account is not truthful or accurate, then there is no safe basis for convicting Lucy Letby on this charge. That is the charge of attempted murder for child K. I'm alleging that Dr Jayaram's account is not accurate. I suggest that his account has been contaminated by the passage of time, his frame of mind at the time of the event, and by his preconceived idea that Lucy is guilty. Here I look at each statement he makes and show that each one is likely to be contaminated by one of the above. I have found evidence of 7 inaccuracies. So first, the facts. So Lucy Letby has been convicted of the attempted murder of child K. Dr Jayaram says he walked into nursery 1, caught her red-handed doing nothing when the baby began to desaturate. This happened, according to the prosecution, when Lucy was alone with child K in nursery 1 between 3:41 and 3:47. I'm going to use court evidence to show that Lucy Letby could not have been alone with child K at any time between 3:41 and 3:47, and that Dr Jayaram's account is inaccurate. So this is just briefly agreed evidence. This is very important to note that there were 2 nurses on duty in nursery 1 where child K was, and that's Joanne Williams and Caroline Oakley. And these are the basic important times. 3:40, Caroline Oakley enters the unit. 3:41, Dr Jayaram is on his phone, and while he's on his phone, Joanne Williams left the unit. And at 3:41, this is agreed evidence, Caroline Oakley, Lucy Letby, Valerie Thomas, Sophie Ellis, Dr Jayaram were all on duty on the neonatal unit. And Lucy Letby was the designated nurse for 2 babies in nursery 2. Valerie Thomas and Sophie Ellis were the designated nurses for babies in nursery 3 and 4. So this is the first inaccuracy. Dr Jayaram says this right at the beginning of his interview. I think it starts at about 2 minutes in. The nurse, Joanne Williams, who was looking after the baby, said she was popping to the delivery suite to talk to the parents, and she said, "I have left Lucy Letby babysitting." Well, Joanne Williams did not say this, actually. Lucy Letby was not babysitting. And I've taken every bit of evidence only from from the transcripts of the trial. Nothing else, none of this is hearsay, none of this is my opinion, it's just from the trial. If it's my opinion, it's normally in red. So she, Joanne Williams, tells the court she does not remember asking anyone in particular to look after child K in her absence. And here we've got, this is the opening speeches. Given her extreme prematurity, child K was taken into nursery 1. Nursery 1, there were 2 babies under the care of Caroline Oakley, who had left the unit and came back at 3:40. At 3:41, Dr Jayaram was on the phone, and it was around this time that child K collapsed, he said. This is the prosecution opening speeches. And between 2:36 and 3:50, Lucy was in nursery 2, making nursing notes for an infant. So Caroline Oakley was with child K in nursery 1 and Lucy was in nursery 2. And it says the same information in the closing speech. Because I could hardly believe it, I had to read it again. So in the closing speech, it says the same facts. Caroline Oakley returned to the unit at 3:40. After this time, it was after this time that Joanne Williams left the unit. So Caroline Oakley comes in and Joanne Williams goes out. They're the two nurses in nursery 1. And this is Dr. Johnson for the prosecution. He refers to the 3:41 transport team note with Dr. Jayaram being called. He says Dr. Jayaram was at the nurse's station on the phone when Joanne Williams left, and the transport team's note is accurate, as they have no reason to be inaccurate. He says Joanne Williams was gone from the unit for 6 minutes, and at that time, somebody had to be looking after child K. He says Dr. Jayaram had said that was Lucy Letby. Well, it wasn't. That's where he got it all wrong. Dr. Jayaram is wrong. 2 nurses, as we have seen, were designated to babies in nursery 1, Joanne Williams and Caroline Oakley. Each nurse waited for the other to return before leaving the unit. Here we are, 3:40 she comes in, and of course Joanne Williams goes out after she's come in, and so she's in there because you've got 2 children in there. You've got 3 babies in there. You've got 1 that's in intensive care and 2 other babies. So it's easier to show it on the map, as a lot of people have found this very confusing, and obviously the jury must have done. So at 3:35, Caroline Oakley and Valerie Thomas are out of the unit. And at this time, 3:35, before anything happens at all, we've got Sophie Ellis, Lucy Letby, Dr. Jayaram, he's at the nurse's station, and we've got child K here. And Joanne Williams is looking after her there. And, of course, there's 2 other babies that Joanne Williams is looking after. Now let's come on to what the prosecution was saying. At 3:40, Caroline Oakley and Valerie Thomas enter. So they're in the unit. So let's have a look at 3:40 now. We've got Sophie Ellis here, we've got Valerie Thomas here, Lucy Letby here, Dr. Jayaram at the nurse's station, and child K with Joanne Williams and Caroline Oakley. Everybody's in there with their designated babies in the right place where they should be. Now, this is the crucial time that the prosecution says it all happened, because at 3:41, Joanne Williams goes out of the unit, and this is where the attempted murder takes place. Okay, so we've got Sophie Ellis here, Valerie Thomas here, Lucy Letby here, Dr. Jayaram here, and Caroline Oakley with child K. And so the prosecution have said that Lucy Letby was alone with child K when the desaturation happened, and Dr. Jayaram saw her doing nothing. Caroline Oakley had come in this door here. Dr. Jayaram hadn't seen her go in. Okay, so let's see what happens next. Here we are again from the trial. Dr. Jayaram said, "I felt extremely uncomfortable with Lucy Letby being there alone in child K, with child K, because he didn't see Caroline Oakley coming in. He's just jumping, you know, he just thinks that Lucy Letby's in there for some reason." Well, this is the reason. "You can call me hysterical, completely irrational, but because of this association, this thought kept coming into my head. After 2.5 minutes, I went to prove to myself that I was being ridiculous and irrational and got up." So Dr. Jayaram had not seen Caroline Oakley enter the nursery, enter the unit or the nursery. Okay, so Caroline Oakley's in nursery 1, as we've just seen. So when Dr. Jayaram entered the nursery 1, he was expecting to see Lucy Letby there. The desaturation happened just as he walked through the door. He saw a nurse, Caroline Oakley, and he mistook her for Lucy Letby. Caroline is, of course, innocent, totally innocent. Everything Dr. Jayaram saw was coloured by his irrational and hysterical frame of mind. Not my words. They are the words he used about himself. Okay, this is my conclusion here, by the way. And the alarm was sounding, which I will show later. So let's go back and see what must have happened. Here's Dr. Jayaram. He knows that Joanne Williams has gone out. He didn't see Caroline Oakley come in, and so he's here. And he's having these hysterical and irrational and ridiculous thoughts. And so he decides to get up, as he says, and he goes into the unit. As he goes into the unit, unfortunately, that's the very moment that child K desaturates. I don't know, the jury were told, but I don't know which of these 4 incubators it was. It really makes no difference, because in the heat of the moment, Dr. Jayaram, although he says Lucy Letby was doing nothing, he would have come in, seen the monitor and gone straight to the child. He's not interested in whether the alarm's sounding or which nurse is in there or what time it is. He comes in, he sees the baby desaturating and he goes straight to work. Of course he does. So this is his second inaccuracy. Ordinarily, the alarms would have been going off. So let's have a look, taken from the trial again. On her return to the neonatal unit, she, Joanne Williams, recalls alarms going off. She came back at 3:47. Door swipe data. She says people were in the room, including Lucy Letby and Dr. Jayaram being there. So Lucy now enters nursery 1 as Joanne Williams comes back, because she's responding to the emergency, as you would, I would hope. So Mr. Myers, the defence, asks about the alarm system. Dr. Jayaram says he is absolutely certain it was not sounding. He is asked to look at a 2018 police interview at Blacon Police Station, and at the time he said he couldn't remember. Dr. Jayaram says, I don't know why I said that. Mr. Myers says Dr. Jayaram said for a second and third time to the police later that interview he couldn't remember if the alarm had gone off or not. That was on the 19th of June 2024. Here's the 20th, when this time, so that's the defence and this is the prosecution. Mr. Johnson, was this an emergency? Joanne Williams, yes, we were responding to alarms. Miss Williams says she cannot recall the saturation levels or what Lucy Letby or Dr. Jayaram were doing at the time. She does not recall being part of the resuscitation efforts, but believes she must have been. Third inaccuracy. Dr. Jayaram says, well, the only possibility was that the tube had to be dislodged deliberately. So, Mr. Myers, again, this is from the court. Mr. Myers says the issue of Charles K was not raised with police until June 2017. Dr. Jayaram says that is when the police investigation started. He said at the time the tube being dislodged was one of the possibilities. Here he says the only possibility, but here to the police he says one of the possibilities. Dr. Jayaram's clinical notes are shown to the court, which Mr. Myers says does not record the tube being dislodged. Dr. Jayaram says the thing at the forefront of his mind was the stabilisation of child K, which is what I've said. Of course it is. He goes in. He's not looking to see whether the tube's been dislodged. He doesn't know whether the alarm's sounding. He doesn't know what the time is. He doesn't know what nurse is in there. He go in there. He saw there was a nurse in there and he went straight to the baby. Of course he did. So Mr. Myers said, you were presented with the fact the tube had been dislodged deliberately. Dr. Jayaram, that was one of the possibilities. Oh. But he says here it's the only possibility. Dr. Jayaram, I was extremely uncomfortable. I didn't see the tube being dislodged. Dr. Jayaram then says, the interview is a long time ago, after the event, and after Lucy was convicted of murders and several attempted murders. He seems to be implying here that it doesn't matter if his account isn't accurate, because after all, Lucy's been convicted of murders and attempted murders. So now we go on to the third inaccuracy. No, it's the third inaccuracy about the dislodging of the tube. Continued. Joanne Williams told the court certain babies who were active could dislodge their tubes, adding she remembered that child K was active. And now the fourth inaccuracy. So Dr. Jayaram told the police that child K had been sedated and so would not be able to dislodge her breathing tube. So here we have, this is 2023, so some of it comes from the one trial and some comes from another, and they vary. What's said is varied. When I say that, the prosecution varies their account. The defence says exactly the same. Joanne Williams as well says exactly the same, consistent in each trial. But the prosecution varies what they said. Dr. Jayaram is asked about the morphine. So he says he's told the police the child's been sedated, so she wouldn't have been able to dislodge her breathing tube. So, it must be deliberate. So here he's asked about the morphine infusion recorded, which appears on the notes above a note added, timed at 3:50. Dr. Jayaram says, having seen the prescription chart, the morphine infusion would not have happened before the desaturation. Mr. Myers said, but Dr. Jayaram had told police child K had been sedated with morphine. Dr. Jayaram said that was what he had believed at the time. He says, in retrospect, he will accept the morphine was not running prior to the desaturation. He said he believed in good faith the morphine was running at the time. So now let's look at the fifth inaccuracy. And I think this is one of the very serious ones, although he doesn't mention it in his interview, it has to be looked at. In the original trial, Dr. Jayaram was very definite about the time child K's desaturation took place, 3:50. However, it was since found out that the door swipe data on that trial was incorrect, and for the retrial, the door swipe data was corrected. In the retrial, Dr. Jayaram and the prosecution moved the time of the event to between 3:41 and 3:47 to fit the accusation. So trial 1, it happened at 3:50, definitely. And you'll see that when I read this out. And trial 2, it happened between 3:41 and 3:47. I'm not going to say what I think about that. The event is recorded as happening by, this is the first trial, 2023. The event is recorded as happening by Dr. Jayaram and Dr. James Smith, who came in at the end. He came up to the unit, and he just for some blood bottles or something, and just at the moment when Dr Jayaram was resuscitating the baby. So that happened at 3:50. Sudden deterioration, SATs dropping to 40%, child K bagged via ET tube with neo-puff. You can see there's nothing about a dislodged tube either. So now this is it. This is very telling. The court is shown swipe data for Joanne Williams, who entered the neonatal unit at 3:47. At the time, it was who left, of course. Mr. Myers says, it is very precise in coinciding with Dr. Jayaram's recollection of waiting 2 to 3 minutes before the desaturation is timed at 3:50, and asked if Dr. Jayaram always has such a precise memory. Dr. Jayaram says, in this event, I did. He adds, I kept telling myself, don't be ridiculous. He obviously thinks that he is very ridiculous and has irrational thoughts, and he has to share that with the court, that he's rather hysterical and irrational and ridiculous. I looked at my watch. He says this on oath. I looked at my watch and it said 3:50. I didn't have a stopwatch. 3:50, I looked at my watch. So let's have a little look then. So these are the ones we've already seen here. This is the one. So this is what happened, you see. In the first trial, we've just heard Dr. Jayaram looked at his watch and said it was 3:50 when it happened. Attempted murder takes place at 3:50. And let's just see. Sophie Ellis, Valerie Thomas, Lucy Letby. As I said, Dr. Smith came in and joined in at the end. Child K with Joanne Williams and Caroline Oakley at 3:50. So you can see, because she came in and not out before, it made it difficult for the prosecution, because now it doesn't work and they've got the retrial. So they have to just change all of that now, and they say it happened here, overlooking the fact that still there was somewhere in there, but still there's only one. So that makes it a little bit easier just to discount one nurse. Harder to discount two nurses, obviously, but one, you can just make out she's out of the unit when actually she's in it. So this is when, so here we have, this is for the trial and this is for the retrial. So as I said, the prosecution has changed their evidence. Caroline Oakley, who, as we have seen, is in there with child K. Of course, she's perfectly innocent. She's just going about her business. Everybody is. Dr. Jayaram's the only person who's irrational and hysterical and ridiculous. Everybody else is just getting on with their duties. All of them, and Caroline Oakley as well. It's just unfortunate that when Dr. Jayaram walked in, the monitor started going off. Caroline Oakley, she was probably with one of the other babies, and obviously maybe just saw the monitor begin to fall, or perhaps the alarm went off just as he walked in the door and she walked over and was at the top of the incubator. It doesn't really matter, because she has not been, she's not being accused of anything, nor will she be. Totally innocent. Dr. Jayaram didn't see anything untoward, unfortunately. It was all in his imagination. And, you know, he says he's hysterical, he's irrational. You know, should he have been there, I wonder, even? Perhaps he needed to have taken some time off. It was all getting too much for him, wasn't it? So this is Caroline Oakley's statement, which he reads out. She says she has no memory of the night shift or child K. She says she knows of occasions in the past where an ET tube has slipped, and of occasions in the past where a tube has been faulty but she cannot say if this was the case here. Lucy Letby also has no recollection of the events that morning, other than the presence of a tiny 25-month gestational baby being in the unit. Because she wasn't in the room, she was in nursery 2, as we've seen. So Lucy Letby is called a liar by the prosecution. She's accused of lying. She's made to look silly and ridiculous. Enough said there. So let's just have a look here. I think, since I'm saying this is the 6th inaccuracy, in his irrational, almost hysterical and ridiculous state of mind, I suggest Dr Jayaram mistook Caroline Oakley for Lucy Letby. So this comes from the Chester news, local news. And so there's this photo in there. Very conveniently, it has Lucy Letby and Caroline Oakley. You can see they're both fair in complexion. They wear the same uniform, both senior nurses, both young looking. I mean, if you just look at their mouths, even their chins are the same shape. Very easy in a moment, in fairness to Dr Jayaram, very easy to mistake one nurse for another. Very easily done. So that's the 6th inaccuracy. And it's a mistake. A mistaken identity is often the reason for miscarriage of justice, unfortunately. So we'll just do this bit. Mr Myers asked Joanne Williams, when you returned, this is when she arrived at the unit just as they were resuscitating the baby, and then this is after. When you returned, you remembered Dr Jayaram saying, "What's happened?" Joanne Williams: Yes, I remember him asking me. Mr Myers: And he asked you who'd been in the room? Joanne Williams: Yes. Dr Jayaram says he has no recollection of this conversation. So the 7th inaccuracy, I would suggest, that night, that is a night that is etched on my memory and will be in my nightmares forever. What his reasons for that are only known to him. But I suggest Dr Jayaram has very little recollection of what really actually happened that night, and that's why he's been caught out, telling the police one thing, telling the court another, not remembering things. He didn't remember who was caring for the babies in nursery 1 in Joanne Williams' absence. It would just been a simple question after to the nurse in question, and he would have found out, oh, it was Caroline Oakley and he'd made a mistake. But he didn't do that. He said he didn't ask anybody about it. He couldn't remember if the alarms were sounding, he told the police. He said deliberate dislodging of the tube was just one of the possibilities of child K's collapse. He didn't remember what time the event happened. He said he thought he looked at his watch and he thought it was 3:50. He was certain it was 3:50, but it obviously wasn't. He didn't remember who was in the room because he asked afterwards, Joanne Williams. He told the police the baby was sedated and then in court admitted he was mistaken. He told the court that he had irrational, almost hysterical and ridiculous thoughts just before he witnessed the crime. He didn't record anything regarding the serious crime he witnessed. He didn't mention it at any of the meetings held or at the internal inquiry following Lucy's grievance. He wrote Lucy Letby a letter of apology for hurting her feelings, but didn't mention he had seen her attempting to murder a baby. Dr Jayaram mentioned the attempted murder for the first time 18 months after the event when interviewed by the police in June 17, and this was noted in the Thirlwall inquiry, actually. It's a recent fact I've gathered. So, the prosecution case rested largely on Dr Jayaram's testimony. If his account is not truthful or accurate, then there is no safe basis for convicting Lucy Letby on this charge. On that point, the defence and the prosecution are in agreement. The defence barrister, Mr. Myers, told the jury. Ultimately, this comes down to the evidence of Dr. Jayaram. I suggest from the evidence I have presented, Dr. Jayaram's account is not truthful or accurate, and so there is no safe basis for Lucy Letby's conviction of the attempted murder of child K. Her attempted murder of child K's conviction, I believe, is unsafe. I am not a medical person, and so I cannot comment on any of the other convictions. However, I would say that if Dr. Jayaram's account is not truthful and accurate, that has a huge bearing on all of the other convictions.